Namo Vishnu Padai Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaudavai Prachani Neva Sesha Sundari Pasta Tudistani. We're up to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Prayag, and Rupa and Sri Ballabh have just arrived there. And Prabhupada begins the teachings of Lord Chaitanya with this particular Leela, so it's very significant. So let's just begin. We'll start. We've done the introduction to this many times, so we never quite get to start reading the verses. So we'll read. This is text number 36. Prabhu Chalayachin Bintu Madhav Darshane Lokka Lok Aishe Prabhu Milone. That Lokka means hundreds of thousands to hundreds of thousands. That's hundreds of millions of people. Lokka, hundreds of thousands of hundreds of thousands. Lok Aishe Prabhu Milone, to join, to associate, Milan, to join, to unite with Mahaprabhu Sankirtan Party and Prayag. Keho Kande, Keho Hashe, Keho Nache Gai, Keho Kande, some are crying, Keho Hashe, some are laughing, Keho Nache, some are dancing, Gai, some are singing. Krishna Krishna Bali, Keho Gada Gadi Jai. Krishna Krishna Bali, some of them are chanting the name of Krishna. Keho Garagadi, Garagadi means rolling on the ground. Some are Garagali Jai, rolling on the ground. I haven't discussed this with you, right? With Narottam's congregation, this hasn't been discussed recently, right?
Yes, Prabhu.
No, I mean, I haven't discussed. Yes, I haven't.
You have not discussed, Prabhu.
Yes, yeah. Just did recently with some of the groups, and I just wanted to make sure that just see the description, just see the ecstasy of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's poetry as he's writing these descriptions of the Sankirtan party that Mahaprabhu is leading in Prayag on the banks of the Triveni, the Mahatirtha. The millions and millions of people, hundreds of millions of people have come to associate with him. Keho Kande, some are crying, Keho Hashe, some are laughing, Keho Nache Gai, some are dancing, and some are singing. Krishna Krishna Bali, Keho Gada Gadi Jai. Some Krishna Krishna Bali, they're all chanting the name of Krishna Gada Gadi Jai, and some of them are rolling on the ground. Just see the poetry of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. How he's describing the beauty of this transcendental Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The people who are completely, to be doing that, crying, look, they're all ecstatic systems. Some are crying, some are laughing, some are dancing, some are singing. Everyone is chanting Krishna, Krishna, some are rolling on the ground. They're ecstatic symptoms because of the presence of the Lord in the Kirtan. Ganga Jamuna Prayag Narilo Dubai, never before had Ganga and Jamuna flooded Prayag. Isn't it interesting that here we were discussing in another group, or maybe you guys, that these villages like Pulia and Shantipur, they're the original names from the times of Mahaprabhu. So similarly, Prayagraj is an ancient city, Prayag. Ganga Jamuna Prayag, and it's very wonderful that the name of the city has been restored by our present government, and we are very much indebted to them for that, because this is very much appreciated by the Vaishnavas. Here is mentioned Prayag. Now I believe it's called Prayagraj, Prayag. Here it's mentioned, the ancient name. Ganga, Jamuna, Prayag. Noriyala, Dubai, they never had it flooded, the Ganga and Jamuna. Prabhu, Dubai lo, Krishna Prem, Bannate. But the Lord, he flooded, Prabhu Dubai lo, he flooded. Prayag, Krishna Prem air, Bannate, with the flood of love of Godhead. And now he goes on to describe Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's behavior, with surrounded by all these millions and millions of people who are crying, who are laughing, who are dancing, rolling on the ground, singing, chanting Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Prema Beshe Nache. Prema Beshe means the love of God completely overwhelming him. Prema Beshe Nache Prabhu. Hari Doni Kori. Hari Doni. Hari Hari. Hari Hari. Hari Dhoni. Prema Dhoni. Dhoni means the sound. At the end of the kirtan, it's called Prem Dhoni. Prem Dhoni. It's called. And this is Hari Dhoni. Hari Hari. Hari Hari. Mahaprabhu was calling out Hari. The sound of Hari. He's making the sound Hari Hari. Hari Dhoni Kori. Prema Beshe Nache, dancing in love of Godhead. Is that not beautiful? I mean, how could you try to, in English, how could you possibly capture that? Prema Beshe Nache, in love of Godhead, overwhelmed with love of Godhead, he's dancing. Prabhu, Hari Dhoni Kori, he's calling out the name of Hari Hari. Prabhupada's translation, when he danced, he raised his arms and shouted, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. He asked everyone to chant Hari Hari. Udva Bahu Kore, Udva Bahu Kore, raising his arms. He raised his arms and shouted, Bole, Bolo Hari Hari, chant the holy names. Prabhu Mohima Deki, Loka Chamatkar, Prabhu Mohima, the extraordinary, the wonderful, Prabhu Mohima, the wonderful activities of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is seeing him dancing and in a kirtan and chanting Hari Bol. As his love of God had overwhelmed him. Prabhu Mahima Deki, seeing his astonishing activities. Lok Chamatkar, all of the people were astounded. Prayage Prabhu Lila Nari Barimbar, and no one can describe to you in detail properly the Prabhu Prayage Prabhu Lila, Prayage Prabhu Lila, the pastimes of Prabhu in Prayag. Prayage Prabhu Lila Nari Barnibar. No one can describe to you. Well, Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, he has described very beautifully. You can see Mahaprabhu dancing in love of Godhead, calling out Hari Hari, surrounded by people who are crying and dancing and rolling on the ground in love of Godhead. So then, not immediately at that time, but the next day, because they did an approach, Rupa and Sanatan, they did an approach Mahaprabhu in the midst of that huge crowd. So where he was residing on the banks of the Ganga at Triveni, Prayag Ghat, Prayag Triveni on the bank of Ganga, they arrived at the place where Mahaprabhu was residing with his assistant, Balabhadra Bhattacharya, who traveled with Mahaprabhu through Vrindavan. So Balabhadra Bhattacharya, he was there, and also one assistant. So now they'd reached Prayag, and Mahaprabhu was remaining there for a few days. And ultimately in that place, he'll teach Rupa Goswami, the Rup Shikha, which is the ultimate in the Siddhanta of the Goswami, Rasa Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Krishna Tattva, are described in this chapter in Mahaprabhu, and many beautiful verses that will describe to you that Bhakti Tattva, Krishna Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Pranta, Shab Shikhailu Prabhu, Bhagavat Siddhanto is very important, the Rup Shikha, because it Shab Siddhanta of the Bhagavatam, all of the conclusions of the Bhagavatam, which is Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Rasa Tattva, they're described in one chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So is that not worth learning Bengali for, just to understand that one chapter? So we're currently entering into that chapter. This is sloka number 48. So they arrive, they come to Mahaprabhu's residence there, Rupa and Anupam, and then they come before Mahaprabhu, Nana Shlok Pori, Ute Pore Bardabar, Nana Shlok Pori, Nana Shlok Pori, quoting verses and then falling on the ground, Nana Shlok Pori, Ute, and getting up, Bore, barba, and again falling down. Barba. Nana shlok, quoting verses, bore falling down, ute, get up, bore, again falling down, barba, again and again, falling down, getting up, quoting verses. Stood up and fell down again and again, Prabhupada, quoting various Sanskrit verses. Prabhu deki prema beshe hoilo duhar. Nana, listen to this verse. It's so beautiful. Nana shlok pori ute pori barbar. Prabhu deki prema beshe hoilo duhar. Prabhu deki prema beshe. Saying the Lord, prema beshe, overwhelmed with love of Godhead. Hoilo duha, those two, it happened. They became overwhelmed with love of Godhead. Overwhelmed with ecstatic emotion. Prema beshe, hoilo duha, these two. Both brothers, duha, both brothers. Shri Rup Dekhiya Prabhu Rapashanna Hoilomon. Shri Rup Dekhiya. Prabhu, when Mahaprabhu, Prabhu Prashanna Hoilomon, Prabhu Prashanna Hoilomon, Prabhu's mind became satisfied, Shri Rup Dekhiya, seeing Rupa Goswami. So it's not that the Guru doesn't have affection for the disciple. According to the level of surrender, then the more the Guru appreciates seeing that disciple and associating with the disciple. Such Samahatma Sadulava. In ISKCON, sometimes we don't realize, we take it granted, but because Prabhupada has made ISKCON to make it possible, because Prabhupada's strategy had to make it possible for modern man. And Prabhupada's followers who applied it in more detail, Bhakti Brikshanam, Hatha temples, youth preaching, all of these ways to keep, people, make them very committed to Krishna consciousness very quickly. And you see in our movement, people take initiation, they're very committed, but in the past, initiation was a rare thing. A person become fully committed to spiritual life. And you see many renunciates, many sannyasis, many brahmacharis, they're completely committed to the spiritual path. So how dear such renunciates are to the spiritual master. Should a Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, a senior renunciate disciples, so you can rely upon. I know many senior leadership in Parthasarthi Mandir, senior leadership in East Kailash, the temples, and in Delhi and in different places. And the devotees that that he can rely on is sannyasis. Srila Jayapataka Swami Maharaj is sannyasi, preaches. Namhata, 2 sannyasis. In Bangladesh, 3 sannyasis. He's achieved so much with his disciples. His disciples have achieved so much. 3 sannyasis in Bangladesh, where there's 50,000 initiated devotees. He's got 3 sannyasi disciples here in Bangladesh. What preaching he has done, and what he has produced. Bhakti Pushta Maharaj, all East India, and Orissa, and Mayapur. So much the Guru can be so much pleased to see a disciple. So Mahaprabhu Prashanna Hoilomon, he became so satisfied, and also seeing that Rupa Goswami had delivered him, he had become delivered. Last time they met, he was a servant of the Mughal governor, sovereignty of Gaudadesh, of Bengal Bhumi. He was employed in the Sultan of Bengal, the Emperor of Bengal, Nawab Hussain Shah. He was employed in his service as the secretary. So, and he is able to extricate himself. After the meeting in Ramkelli, Rupa Goswami very quickly, he just left and took Anupam with him. But Sanatana Goswami, you will hear the story. Sanatana Goswami, he couldn't leave. Nawab came, he was at home. Nawab put him in prison. But Rupa Goswami had already gone with Anupam. So it was a quick departure, unexpected. Unexpected. It is interesting because if you remember back to Srila Vrindavan Thakur's description of Mahaprabhu in Ramkelli, which doesn't mention in details, it doesn't mention about the meeting with Rupa and Sanatana. So that's another way in which the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita complements the Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. Now, in that description, Srila Vrindavan Thakur explains the glories of Mahaprabhu Sankirtan. They reached the ears of the Noah. And he made a declaration of being purified, hearing from that chief constable of police, I've shared this with you in the past, that chief constable of police, in fact, before we got to those Mahaprabhu's attempt to go to Vrindavan. So that chief constable of police's description, it affected the heart of the Nawab. Hearing the glorification of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's description of his Sankirtan, which is so astonishing. So at that time, the affected Nawab, he said, let him go wherever he wants. Let him say whatever he likes. Let him do whatever he likes. And if anyone gets in his way, then I will destroy them and their whole family. And then he retired to his private quarters and made that declaration. But then in the middle of the night, Rupa and Sanatan went and they spoke, and that's when the meeting occurred. But now, having this happened now, this is not so long. That event of Mahaprabhu doing that happened when? That happened before? Yeah, that happened before. That happened before that. Yeah, that happened before. And then Rupa left. After that, Rupa left, and now they're meeting up. Yeah. So Rupa was able to escape. So seeing that, Prabhu Prashanna Hoiloman, seeing that, Prabhu Prashanna Hoiloman, Mon, he became so satisfied seeing that Rupa Goswami had come and he'd been able to he's come, why is he come? It's not that they're just in passing, hey, how are you, Rupa? Hey, Mahaprabhu, seeing you here, Prayag. No. He went there to see him. He went there to surrender at his lotus feet. Now I've given all that up. I've given up my wealth. I've come here. You order me. I will remain with you. That's what he came there for. So he's not going to be Prashanna Hoilomon. Is he not going to be so satisfied seeing him? Giving up all of that. He was the Rupa Goswami is described as Chakvatuna Mashesha Mandalapati Shanam Mandalapati. He was the senior in the aristocracy of the Gaudiya society and leadership in the Mughal kingdom. Lost interest in that entirely. Buddha Dina Ganesha Kurunea Kopina Kontashi told Buddha Dinagon for the fallen, the Dinagon, for the common man, Buddha Dinagon, Kurunaya, Buddha Dinagon Kurunaya, for the mercy for the fallen man, Buddha. Kopina Kontashi told. They accepted, they gave up all that aristocracy and royalty and position and influence and facility, Kopina Kontasrito, and they accepted a loincloth for performing Hari Raja. So should this not be desired before one gives up his body? To give up all positions, to give up all, and simply become fully dependent on the mercy of the Lord for one's assistance and engage in chanting the holy name of the Lord? Should not one aspire to achieve that level of consciousness and sadhana practice before giving up this body? Rupa Goswami was ready to do what Mahaprabhu ordered, and Mahaprabhu does order, go to Vrindavan, and he goes. It's an underdeveloped place, and they slept. They're under trees. Aniket duha boni joto brigagon ek briket tole ek ratre shayon. Aniket duha. They didn't have rooms. How renunciates? They have rooms. They have facility, big cameras with zoom lenses, and they have all facilities, computers. Goswami is the Jukta Vairagis. They accepted what was required for writing, but they just wrote on palm leaf. So they accepted whatever resources were available and completely utilized that, and with exclusive utilization in the service of the Lord. They weren't doing gossip with their pens and writing love notes. They weren't like socializing. Aniket duha broni boni jotta brikagon in the tree in the forest. How many trees there are? Ek brike tole ek ratre shayon. Ek brike tole at the root underneath one tree. Ek ratre shayon. They would lie down for one night. So what renunciation they're prepared to accept, and the Lord is so pleased that they've given up. This person has come and it's given up such aristocracy for such a humble and lifestyle. Kabi Bhakti Shastra, Kore Likon, Chaitanya Chinta, Kobe Chaitanya Likon, Chaitanya Chinton, Chaitanya Kota Shuni, Chaitanya Chinton, Kabi Bhakti Shastra. What were they doing in Vrindavan is described in this chapter. Kabi Bhakti Shastra, Kore Likon. Sometimes they were writing the Bhakti Shastras. And therefore we know the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. We know the name of Radharani, which is not found in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So only in the writings of the Goswamis do we understand the Vrindavan Leela. Radharani's name is not even found in the Bhagavatam. So all of these detailed leelas in the past and the leelas in the pastime places of Brajabhumi, they're all the realization of Rupa and Sanatan. Kavi Bhakti Rosh Shastra Koraya Likon. Sometimes they're writing these descriptions. Kavi Bhakti Rosh Shastra Bhakti Rosh Shastra Koraya Likon. Sometimes they're writing it. Chaitanya Katha Shune Kavi Chaitanya Chinton. Chaitanya Katha Shune. Sometimes they were discussing about Lord Chaitanya. Chaitanya Kavi Chaitanya Chinton, and sometimes just thinking about the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this way, they engage their entire time, their entire life, their entire consciousness. Shankyapurvaganam Natibi Kalavishani Krito. Sankyapurvaganam, regulated chanting, Sankyapurvaganam, Gana Natibi, singing and dancing, Kalavishani Krito. In this way, they utilize, and falling down, paying obeisances, Kalavishani Krito. In this way, they utilize their time. What is that? Nidra Haravahadikaji Vijito. They lost interest in eating and sleeping. Nidra Aha Vihadikari, and enjoyment. Vijito, they completely lost interest in. But they were excessively humble. Mande Rupa Shanatana Raghuyugo Shijiva Gopalako. And this way the Goswamis are glorified, and their example should be desired to be emulated. And Mahaprabhu, so much he was satisfied seeing Rupa Goswami. They delivered him from the materialistic way of life, which is based on pound, shilling, and pence. And then Mahaprabhu, he quotes verses from Hari Bhakti Vilas out of appreciation. This is how Mahaprabhu rolls. He's enlivened in spiritual consciousness. He sees Rupa Goswami. He speaks to him, get up, he quotes verses. Name Bhakti Chaturvedi Mad Bhakti Swapa Chapriyaha Tasmai Dayam Chatograyam Chachapuja Jatahi Aham. That even one is Chaturvedi, having studied all the Vedas, 4 Vedas, Chaturvedi, Trivedi, Chaturvedi. If one is Nami Bhakta, if he's not my devotee, Mad Bhakta Swapa Chapriyaha, he's not as dear to me as my devotee who even have been born in the family of dog eaters. Mad Bhakta Swapa Chapriyaha. More dear to me is a devotee who's born in the family of a devotee, even though born in the family of meat eaters, than a Chaturvedi who's not my devotee. Now that devotee of mine who may even been born in the family of meat eaters, Tasmai Dayam, you should offer everything to him. Tatograyam, whatever he offers should be accepted. Sacha Puja Jatahi Aham, he is as worshipable as I am. Mahaprabhu is showing this principle of his movement here, that regardless of one's background, Swapacha, born in a family of dog eaters, actually, that's no disqualification for becoming Harihar Priya. Mad Bhakta Swapacha Priya, very dear to the Lord, and as worshipable, Shacha Puja Jatahi Aham, as worshipable as the Lord himself, as declared by the Lord himself. Ei shlok pore duhare koilo alingon. Ei shlok pore duhare koilo alingon. Having said this, he embraced the two. Kripate duhare matai doyela charan, and out of mercy he placed his feet on the heads of the 2 brothers. Now, Prabhu Kripa Paya Duha Dui Hat Juri, receiving this mercy of the Lord, the 2, Anupam and Rupa Goswami, they folded their palms like this in front. Dinna hoye stuti kore binoy achari. Dinna hoye, becoming very humble. Stuti kore, they offered prayers, they offered glorification. Binoy achari, binoy achari, binoy achari. What a beautiful way of describing. Their behavior was very humble. Binoy achari, and great humility. Binoy achari. We have brahmachari, binoy achari. Binoy achari, a very humble person, but acts in a very humble way. Binoy achari. It's very first class Bengali. Binoy achari, because it's rather in English you'd say humble, but a binoy achari, one who's perfect in humility and his behavior reflects the value of humility. That's what it means. Binoy achari, one who demonstrates achari and practices humility. Binoy achari, one who practices humility. So they, in a very humble way. And Rupa Goswami prayed this important prayer that we chant when we offer the Bhagavat to the Lord. Namo Mahabharanaya Krishna Prempadayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gauda Dvishaya Namaha. The Mahabharanaya, the greatly munificent incarnation, Krishna Prema Pradayate, who's giving away Krishna Prema. Now, even before hearing the Rupshika, in this chapter where he gets clarification on Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, and Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, and Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Pranta. So, before hearing all of that explanation and being taught in the Rupshika science, still Rupa Goswami is aware that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come as Krishna Prem Pradayate, and he's the Mahabharanaya Avadar. He's the most munificent incarnation, and he's come to give away love of Godhead. So even before the Rupshika, Rupa Goswami has this realization of who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. He's Krishnaya, Krishna Chaitanya. He's Krishna himself in the form of Krishna Chaitanya. Namne Gauda Dishenama, and he's in golden color. The form and fair complexion of Chaitanya who was thus known as Gauranga. This is from Teaching for Lord Chaitanya, Prabhupada's translation. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Krishna himself. That he had assumed the form and fair complexion of Chaitanya was thus known as Gauranga, the golden one. And he was the most magnificent incarnation of Krishna because he was distributing love of Krishna. Yeah, so he's the Mahabharanaya, the most magnificent. So isn't the most magnificent, isn't that the most important? Because the Lord comes to show magnificence, so the most magnificent, well, that's the most important. So in this way they met, and Mahaprabhu discussed also with Rupa Goswami about Sanatana Goswami, and then Mahaprabhu took prasadam, and Rupa and Anupam, they took the remnants of that prasadam. So then at this time, this great Acharya of the Vallabha Sampradaya, which Prabhupada mentions is still prevalent in Mumbai. Prabhupada says Bombay. And Prabhupada just says Bombay. It's not called Bombay anymore, so Prabhupada never talked about Mumbai. At least not that I'm aware. But so Vallabhacharya Sampradaya, Prabhupada says, is prominent in Bombay and Bharshana. I've sometimes seen people chanting that square Japamala. I believe that's the Vallabha Sampradaya. So he associated with Mahaprabhu. And at that time he came and visited. He was staying on the opposite bank of the Ganga in Prayag at a place called Adailagram. And he'll take Mahaprabhu there. So on this occasion he arrived when Rupa and Anupam were both there. And then they embraced. Mahaprabhu embraced Vallabhacharya, and they discussed different topics about Krishna consciousness, and Mahaprabhu felt ecstatic love, and Vallabhacharya also is feeling ecstatic love of Godhead. Wouldn't you? Even a sinful wretch like myself, in the association of very advanced Vaishnavas, we feel the awakening of love of Godhead just being in their association. Once we leave their association, we don't feel it again. But getting close to them, just when you're close to such a Prema Bhakta, Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite. Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite, it emanates. Prema Bhakti, it is get close to. So they're both who are feeling ecstatic love of Godhead, Vallabhacharya. And Mahaprabhu was trying to restrain his ecstatic symptoms, but Vallabhacharya could see that Mahaprabhu was trying to restrain his symptoms of love of Godhead. So at that time, Rupa and Vallabha, they're there, and they, when seeing Vallabhacharya come, who's an Acharya, who's a Brahmin, Vaishnava, learned scholar, and his Rupa and Anupam, they fell on the ground, offering obeisances. And then Vallabhacharya, he's walking towards them, and then they ran to a more distant place. At that time, of course, they're always chanting the holy name of the Lord, and they see Vallabhacharya, they fall down on the ground, they get up, they're chanting the holy name of the Lord, and then he's coming, they run to a distant place. And then Rupa Goswami says, we are untouchable. We are untouchable. And then Mahaprabhu says to Ballabhacharya, don't touch him. You know, he's degraded. He's outcast from the Brahminical society. He didn't go into the details, but that was a fact. There was a case that could be lodged. And Rupa Goswami says, don't touch me. And Mahaprabhu says, don't touch him. So in this way, actually, Mahaprabhu says that you're an experienced performer of the sacrifices. And you're a member of the aristocracy, so it's not appropriate for you to go close to that person and touch him. He's going to embrace them. Now, Mahaprabhu, Prabhupada in the purport, he speaks quite strongly about the South Indian Brahmins, he mentions. He says that the Brahmins are puffed up with false prestige because they belong to aristocracy and perform Vedic sacrifices. He says in South India especially, fastidious position is most prominent in South India. So although Mahaprabhu actually started a revolution against this Brahminical system by inaugurating chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, which is, one can be delivered regardless of how Prabhupada says, caste, creed, color, or social position. And then Ballabhacharya, he realized that Mahaprabhu was testing him. But anyway, he responded in a way that he felt was the appropriate. He said, since these two are constantly chanting the holy name of Krishna, how can they be considered untouchable? And then he quoted from the Bhagavatam. Ballabhacharya quoted from the Bhagavatam. This is how the Vaishnava Brahmins are meant to interact with each other, establish evidence on the basis of the Shastra. Aho bhatta sapachoto gari yang jiva gari bhata dinama tubhyam tepos. That how glorious, aho, are the dog eaters who jiva gre bhata dinama tubhyam, take your name even on the tip of their tongue. Jiva gre, on the tip of the tongue, or even begin a little chanting. The sapacho, the dog eaters, how glorious are the dog eaters, sapacha, who take little of your chanting. Jiva grevata denamatu, taking your name on their lip, on their tongue, a little chanting. Tepus tapos, they performed all the austerities. Juhuvu shashnu, they performed all the sacrifices. Juhuvu shashnu, taking bath in all the holy places of pilgrimage. Arya developed all the good qualities of Aryan civilization. Brahmanachu studied the Vedas. Namagrinanti, just by taking your name. Namagrinanti yete. He's quoting this verse from Madhava Huti. She's speaking to Kapil Muni there in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Aho bhatta sapacho, how glorious they are, even those born in the family of dog eaters, that they performed all the sacrifices, all the ritualistic ceremonies, taken bath in all the holy places, developed all the good qualities of Aryan civilization, studied all the Vedas simply by chanting your name. So yes, Mahaprabhu, hearing this, he was very, very pleased. You go before Mahaprabhu, you're discussing something, you quote verses from the Bhagavatam. You go before a great Vaishnava, you're having a discussion, quote verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. That's why we're reading the books. That's why Prabhupada has given us the books and the word for word. Should be studying the Bhagavatam, should be studying something. So Mahaprabhu quotes again, this is from Hari Bhakti Shuddhodaya, that Bhagavad Bhakti Hina Jati Shastram Japastapaha. Bhagavad Bhakti Hina, here without devotion. Jati Shastram, your birth, your learning. Japa, your prayer. Tapaha, your austerities. Arpranaya Shadeha Shah, just like a dead body. Arpranaya, a lifeless body. Arpranaya Shadeha. Mandalam Lokaranjanam, which is decorated with flowers to give pleasure to the common people. Bhagavad Bhakti Hina Shah. Your birth, Shastram, your learning, Japa, your prayer, Tapa, your austerities. They're just like decoration on a dead body if you're not serving Lord Hari. So then, Ballabhacharya, he took Mahaprabhu to cross him on the river in a boat. When Mahaprabhu saw the surface of the Jamuna, the blackish color, he became overwhelmed with love of Godhead. He's in the boat. He immediately jumped into the Jamuna and he's in ecstatic love of Godhead in the water. And then they grabbed Mahaprabhu, they pulled him out, and then on the boat, he's all wet and he's still overwhelmed with love of God. He begins to dance, and the boat begins to sink. Somehow Mahaprabhu was trying to restrain himself. This is love of Godhead that Mahaprabhu experiences. It's not like, we make a show of raise your arms and give it on there. I'm in ecstasy. He can't contain him. He jumps into the river, he's dancing on the boat, just seeing he's not even the kirtan. He's just seeing the blackish color of the Jamuna. He's on the boat, he's trying to contain his ecstatic symptom. Finally, he became calm enough for him to reach the other side. So then he was received in the house of Ballabhacharya. They gave him a sitting place and they washed his feet. He sprinkled the water, that Charanamrita, on the heads of all of the family members. They changed his garments, right, because he jumped in the Jamuna. And then they worshipped him with lamps. And then they cooked and they offered him prasadam. And then after prasadam, he was given the mukshuddhi to all different varieties, freshly cooked by his wife. And then he lay down and Ballabhacharya began massaging his legs. So is this not the way to serve a Vaishnava? He arrives, wash his feet, and then give new clothes, give gifts, sprinkle that water over the family members, offer arti, refreshment, and sit down, offer prasadam. As he's resting, massage his lotus feet, massaging his legs. And in this way, Mahaprabhu showed his mercy to Ballabhacharya. Rupa and Anupam were also there, and they took prasadam after Mahaprabhu. They took remnants of Mahaprabhu's prasadam. And then they came back on a different route because it was too dangerous. This Ballabhacharya, he was afraid to bring Mahaprabhu back again over the Jamuna. So they came a different way. And then Loka Bir Bhaye Prabhu Dashashvamed Jaya. Loka Bira Bhaye. That's a crowd, out of fear of the crowd. Lok Bira Bhaye Prabhu Dashashvamed Jai. Rup Goshai Shika Koren Shakti Shanchai. So they're meant to the Dashashvamed Ghat. Dashashvamed Ghat. They went there to avoid the crowds, and at that place, Rup Goshai Shika Koran Shakti Shanchai. He instructed Rupa Goswami that by such instructions, he empowered Rupa Goswami in the philosophy of devotional service. And then the topics, as you mentioned, the topics of that is text 115 of chapter 19. The topics that will be discussed in this Rupshika, Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Rasha Tattva, Pranta, Shab Shikalo Prabhu, Bhagavat Shidanto. So this is the conclusion of the Bhagavatam in one condensed section of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's why the book is so special. Bhagavat Shidanto, you can find out the conclusion of the Bhagavatam, from which all of the Bhagavatam topics can be revealing. Shab Shikalo Prabhu, Mahaprabhu taught that to Rupa Goswami, which is Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Pranto, the science of loving Krishna, on the basis of which Prabhupada wrote, Rupa Goswami wrote Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and Prabhupada wrote the Nectar of Devotion. So that book is based on these teachings. And so we'll be discussing this over the next month or so, or even longer. We'll take our time and go through this through Shikha. That's text 115. We'll be beginning from next time. So are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, first of all, thanks a lot for taking our today's class. So my question is, Prabhu, in today's pastime, Prabhuji, you talk about Rupa and Sanatana Goswami surrender and renunciation towards Mahaprabhu. So as a sadhakas, what we can do to develop that type of or some sort of that renunciation and surrender in our devotional life?
I don't feel that, Jivamrit Prabhu, I don't feel that you need to, try to force that sort of renunciation upon yourself. All you need to do is to further engage yourself in the service of the Lord as given by the respective devotees under whom you serve. So the more that you can accept, the more service that you can accept, that's the level of renunciation that the Prabhupada is demonstrating in his own following of Rupa Goswami. Prabhupada remained in the preaching mission. So he never, accepted just a loincloth and simple cloth and engaged in just chanting the holy name on the banks of Radha Kund. Prabhupada didn't do that. So we don't need to do that. We just need to Jukta Bharagya means that we just need to take more and more responsibility in the preaching mission and give up material things to do that. That's the renunciation that we by doing will become a true Rupanuga. Because you can't jump over the Acharya. This is Prabhupada. Prabhupada's the Rupanuga, and we'll follow Rupa Goswami through Prabhupada. And this is obviously Prabhupada's mood. He wanted the devotees to be engaged in preaching, and that's our renunciation. The more you can dedicate your effort and your time and sacrifice for preaching, that's the level of renunciation that we, just like Jayapataka Swami Maharaj and our other leaders. They could just be staying in one place and doing severe bhajan. Archan and Shravan and chanting, 64 rounds, easy for them to do. But they're not doing that. They're traveling and preaching. So that's the example. So that's what the real Rupanugas, that was Prabhupada's mood, and that's what the followers of Prabhupada's and the followers of Prabhupada's followers. That's the mood. That's the way. We cannot just prasada, Bhagavat prasada. By his mercy, we get the mercy of the Lord and the previous acharyas. It cannot be got in any other way. So you cannot imitate Rupa Goswami in any way which is doesn't reflect the example of Srila Prabhupada.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat pranams, Prabhuji.
Bhankshini Shaki Devi Dasi.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Krishna Bhakti Labhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I had a question. Prabhuji, in my daily sadhana practice, I am not able to focus very nicely in my chanting. And I have also observed that I'm not being humble enough, not just with outsiders, but also with devotees and my own family members also. Can you please help me, Prabhuji?
Well, Bhankshini Shaki, that's first of all, we're very encouraged to hear that according to your own personal evaluation, you're not being humble enough. So that's much better than thinking you are being humble enough. So you're already, if you think you have to improve in humility, so that's great. So then you try to avoid acting in a way that Mahaprabhu, is simple, that Amanina Manadaina Kirtaniya Sadahari. You want to chant the holy name constantly, then Amanina Manadaina. No respect for me, and offer all respect to others.
Yes.
Kirtaniya Sadahari. So Kirtaniya Sadahari. So this will affect your chanting. Now you can't just do that on the street with all the common people. You fall down at the man with the milk at the door, and I'm so fallen and you're an uttam. It doesn't work. So you carry on with that, but when you associate with advanced devotees,
yes,
then you practice all level of humility.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and then it'll be appreciated. It'll be directly so much appreciated by Krishna when you in a serious and formal way. It's not that you have to. It's quality, not quantity. You don't have to act like that all the time. You get the job done in your street dharma and home, your house mother and all of that. You can't let everyone just walk over you, because then you're the Krishna conscious one there anyway. But
yes.
when you're in a situation, a protected environment with the advanced devotee sangha,
yes,
and then you can demonstrate great humility, sustain it, and it'll be very purifying. That's the time to do that. It'll be very that's the time. The quality. Performance will be more quality, and then it will be very purifying. You don't have to do it all the time. It doesn't work. You get frustrated if you try to live like that all the time. It's not expected. You're not a renunciate. You're in a family life, so you have those responsibilities. So on occasion, when you can be really acting as Bhankshini Shaki Devi Dasi, the Radha Shaki associate of Sri Radhika, and develop that mood and of great humility. Such an eternal associate of Sri Radhika can only be in consciousness of such great humility. There's beyond, like the Goswamis, the excess of humility. So on occasion, when you're in an association of a great Vaishnava, you demonstrate that, you try to cultivate that mood, and then that's that's how to roll.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. That was very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Anything else this evening? Okay, so yeah, we'll carry on next week with the Rupshika actually beginning. We'll look at some of the teachings of Rupa Goswami. Teachings of Mahabuddha Rupa Goswami. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.